Welcome to another edition of BizCast. Today we're doing a Zoom webinar with Roland Jacobs from AspireUp and David Molo from Paper2. We're going to be talking about packaged goods, especially as they apply to the cannabis industry. In today's crowded marketplace, brands that deliver packaged goods emerge every day, and loyalty is becoming very thin. To achieve a competitive advantage, companies must remember that their packaging contains far more than the product. It holds the potential to serve as an organizing principle for businesses and a springboard for value creation. And on that point, we're going to be talking to Roland and David on, first of all, how packaging in general applies to this industry, and then with David, how the Paper2 product has been changing the industry and really defining some brands and separating them from the competition. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Roland.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Anatoly. I appreciate that. And this is such a fun topic because, packaging is where the rubber meets the road. But a lot of my life has been spent helping to define ultimately what that packaging needs to deliver. I spent 10 years at the Clorox company launching dozens of brands. So brands like Tilex and 409 and Liquid Plumber, very different from cannabis. But all of the principles that apply in consumer packaged goods transfer directly into the cannabis business or frankly, any business that wants to launch a brand, both on the consumer side and on the B2B side. But the first question that any business owner or manager should ask is, what's my fundamental strategy? Michael Porter, one of Harvard Business School professors that I had back in the day, had two generic strategies. Either you could be cheaper or you could be different. And playing a cost leadership game is a tough one. Being cheaper in a commoditized industry with a focus on price is always hard. So you're really left with the strategy choice of differentiation. And how do you achieve differentiation? You have to define your brand strategy. And I'll just simplify it to say it's really, who is that well-focused target audience that you're going to win with? What business are you in? And then how can you be best in the world at delivering something to that target audience? It's a high bar, but being best in the world is important. And that really is the foundation of a brand strategy. And once you have the brand strategy, defining who your target is, what business you're in, and how to be best in the world, then you're ready to define what your packaging and all of the other touch points that touch your consumer are meant to be. So David has a lot of experience on both the design of the approach as well as executing. So love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you hit it right on the nail when you're talking about kind of who the packaging is for and being different. Because, there's studies out there that essentially look at how consumers make purchasing decisions. And a lot of those purchasing decisions are made not prior to the store visit, but as they're in the store browsing, let's say, the shelf, right? And if you're basically looking at any store shelf, pretty much in any industry these days, all you're going to see is, square boxes. So how do you stand out, right? There are studies out there that talk about standing out on the shelf from a design perspective. There are studies that talk about the form factor. There are studies that talk about kind of an emotional reaction to colors and typeface and all of those things that kind of combine together. And I think, one of the features that we offer from a tube packaging perspective is kind of all three, because, not only do you have the design, but also you have the form factor and then all of the other things that kind of stand out to consumers. And then, the second touch point there is essentially once they purchase the packaging and, they're unboxing the product, there's a whole experience associated with the unboxing experience. In tube specifically, there's, as you open the cap, there's like an audible pop, which is, auditory branding. And there's like all these little components you can play around with from a form factor and kind of unboxing experience perspective. And then, the third thing here also is especially in the cannabis industry, as you look at kind of all the cannabis industry packaging, in a lot of states that require child resistance packaging, it's all plastic. So you basically have a sea of plastic packaging that's all single use. And we're kind of fighting that stigma to go with child resistant plastic packaging, because most of the packaging for us is paper based. So 90% of it is paper based, and there's a child resistance cap that, you know, is plastic, but it's way better than anything else out there.
Yeah, I love how you touched on the experience. I think back in the day when I started at Clorox, it was really a focus on communicating your brand benefits. Now it's delivering an experience, and thinking about the pop of the package, for example, is a great one. I tend to think of three different things when it comes to package design from the execution standpoint. David, you touched on I think the most important one. It has to be distinctive. It has to register an impression right away, and it has to stand out from what is invariably an incredibly cluttered environment. But the distinctiveness sometimes overshadows the second point, which is it needs to communicate the benefits. It needs to be very simple in describing what is this product really going to deliver, both in benefits and attributes. Sometimes I see companies that have attribute after attribute, something like, less sugar or great flavor or something like that, and using a food example, and they cover their package with 20 different attributes. Well, there's no way you can register a brand impression or communicate and be best in the world to a well-defined audience if it's like that. Super simple. And the third is, we should all be thinking when we launch products that it's not just one product. It's a line of products. Ideally, what you want to do is build a brand that will have presence at the shelf. So the third criteria is your packaging has to deliver and clarify your brand architecture. Architecture is really thinking about how will one product relate to another in a line to do two things. One, have an overall impression of the brand that's very consistent, but also have a very clear way of discerning differences between the different products so that the decision is simple. Anytime you add complexity to the purchase decision at the shelf, your odds of not making a sale go through the roof.
Oh yeah, not even the question. So again, the first thing I think is, grabbing attention, because as you're walking the aisle in the store and you're looking, let's say at, I don't know, honestly, any product these days, you want to make sure that packaging stands out. And then once your eyes and hand gravitate towards that box, or a tube in this case, you grab it, and then the design starts to make sense. Because, how do you talk about the value proposition of the product? How do you talk about kind of the non-GMO or cruelty-free or, sugar-free, or all of those things you've mentioned, in a way that kind of resonates with the consumer, right? And that's essentially how they make a packaging or a purchasing decisions. And it's, form factor and design and the wording and the branding and the colors and the logo and kind of the whole thing across the line. Because like you mentioned, like if you're looking at, even a line of candles, for example, how do all those things kind of combine into a very cohesive story for the brand? Absolutely.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that I was at Clorox for many years and launched products. I launched the Orbitz online travel website. But what I've been doing the last 18 years or so is helping companies, both big and small, with their marketing strategy, and then to deliver a differentiated brand. How do you build up a brand to the point where ideally people aren't even thinking about the decision at shelf? They're just going for your brand. But in an emerging category like cannabis, it's the decisions you make today will have vast impact on what your total potential value of your brand, of your business is. So now is the time to really think very strategically about what is it we stand for, and how do we execute an experience, as David said, in the best way. Now, I do some guest lecturing at Kellogg, Northwestern's business school, and my friend Tim Calkins over there did a fun survey among his MBA students. And it really sort of brings the point to life about the strength of a brand. He showed the students a photograph of some ladies' diamond earrings, a third of a carat, good quality, and basically asked the class, what do you think this pair of diamond earrings should sell for? And the class had to all write down what they thought the right price would be. And when he did the survey, it was $550. That was the price of the diamond earrings. And then he threw up the Tiffany logo. And he said, well, I'm going to give you one more piece of information. What if you knew that these diamond earrings are from Tiffany? And the class voted again, and they said before it was $550, then it was $873. The only thing that changed is the Tiffany brand was put on there. And then just to make it fun, he put up another logo. He put up the Walmart logo and said, okay, actually these diamond earrings, the same diamond earrings, are now sold by Walmart. Vote again, tell me what you think they're worth. And the result was $87. So my point is, the way I started was talking about differentiation, right? You don't want to play the cost game, the focus on price. You want to build a brand like Tiffany's has done, which to David's point has the whole experience wired, and it really makes you feel special when you're buying it. Now, I know cannabis is very different in terms of the physical product, but the issue is exactly the same. How do you create this sense of value perception if you're selling a vape or a joint or whatever it is? Don't let it become a commodity. Give it a brand, give it a point of difference, and give it great packaging.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that's a great example of kind of how to think about, where your brand stands. Because honestly, at every single price point and every single logo you've mentioned, I'm sure there's a customer on the end that's willing to pay whatever that price is, right? There's plenty of customers who essentially go to Walmart and don't mind paying, $85 for diamond earrings. And at the same time, there are plenty of people who go to Tiffany and pay $2,500 for the same looking pair of earrings. But, the Tiffany brand is associated with, status and value and kind of honor tradition that's been refined over time. And, the only thing there is if you're a starting out brand and you're a brand new kind of company bringing a product to the market, you don't have years of that experience that Tiffany does, but that's a good roadmap of how to get there. Absolutely.
And going beyond the shelf space, I have a question too. So we live in a world right now where e-commerce is doing more and more. I mean, obviously it's taken on retail by storm. With the cannabis industry, it's got some similarities with e-commerce in that people don't walk by a shelf and they're able to touch the product and feel it and kind of, get a sense for it. They're seeing it from far away, whether it's on a shelf, behind the salesperson, or whether it's looking at it on Amazon, it's the same thing. The experience really comes in when they're holding that product, whether it's, the unboxing experience when you unwrap the regular Amazon box and take something out of it, and that's your association with the brand, or whether it's getting the product from a dispensary and coming home. How do you feel in general that does that packaging and does that brand not just affect buying patterns of people, what they're going to choose to take off the shelf, but how they're going to associate with the brand and what they're going to come back to in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one pretty quickly. There are a few industries like that where you don't get to try the product. You're essentially buying it a lot of times on the design or the brand or the packaging, and then you're kind of getting into the product. Liquor is one of them, right? Like the way I shop for wine, for example, is pretty much all packaging because I have no idea what's inside. Same thing with scotch, right? Same thing with books. Books is another one, like the cover design or the fonts used on the cover design. A lot of times make me purchase one book over another, because if I don't know who the author is and kind of I haven't read the book yet, I have to make some kind of decision on it, and cover design is one of them. And I think cannabis is kind of in line with that, because, as you haven't smoked the product or you haven't eaten the edibles, like how are you going to make a decision about the quality of the product or what that brand stands for? And I think design and packaging is one of those things that kind of make the purchasing decision easier across the board.
Yeah, it's a great answer. It's incredibly important, and Anatoly, you touched on the difference of the experience in the store versus online. So for those businesses that are selling in both places, and hopefully we'll be able to sell more and more cannabis products online over time, but initially the in-store experience is so critical. So the packaging, of course, and it often behind glass has to speak the product, but to the extent there's an opportunity to touch and hold and experience the pop, as David said, and opening a package, that in-store experience is going to serve a special role for you. Think about the role of each of those touch points. So when you move over to e-commerce, you have largely today a two-dimensional image of a package and graphics associated with it. Maybe eventually with virtual reality, we'll have a richer experience, but today that's where we are. When I launched Orbits, one of the big challenges was if a consumer shops for a hotel room, right? They pull up a long list of hotels and they have only basic data, how many stars it is, what's the price per night, etc. Well, that's a real problem because it kind of pushes you into a price game. So what the hoteliers really want is the consumer's ability to click, see the actual room, see the amenities, understand the experience. They're much more likely to be able to compete on differentiation than on price. So same thing applies. The packaging needs to communicate incredibly well in an e-commerce environment because you have even less richness to the experience.
Yep. And packaging, not just in terms of something physical, but even digital, because what you're describing is digital packaging, especially for a lot of digital products like software, right? In the old days, you used to go to Best Buy and look at a shelf of software titles, and you'd have a box. Like now, there's no box. Like that you still need packaging though. So packaging as a metaphor, essentially, is one of those things for digital products too.
Got it. And then, one more thing I just wanted to touch on as we wrap up. David touched on this earlier, saying that a lot of the packaging that's currently in the cannabis industry is plastic. You take an industry that's a green industry, kind of pardon the pun on this, but and then the one thing when they get to packaging, it's all plastic. None of it is sustainable. And I've heard that this has been a problem in the industry that both the owners of the businesses as well as the end users do complain about that. So paper tube lends itself really well to that. But on a more global scale of packaging and marketing, Roland, how have you seen kind of the evolution of the eco-friendly, and how important is it to have eco-friendly packaging and to really create that message around the brand?
Yeah, that's a great point, Anatoly. It's I think every manufacturer is wrestling with this. In a world where people see packaging as a necessary evil because it adds to the waste stream, we need to deliver solutions that are both in reality better for the environment, but also importantly, perception-wise are better for the environment. Sometimes they don't match up. For example, having a product that, let's say, is biodegradable, and you put biodegradable on the package, and that may make consumers feel better. But in a landfill, it may biodegrade in 200 years or 300 years, something like that. So it's a real tricky business with respect to claims. But in general, every manufacturer is needing to focus on sustainability focus. We have a client right now, a very large producer of styrofoam plates and paper plates and all of this. And we have a big project right now to figure out with some innovative materials that they've discovered that offer biodegradability and compostability, what is the best way to communicate those benefits to consumers? There's a lot of different things you can say, some not compelling, some not actually realistic. And how do you strike the right balance in truth-telling, but also persuasiveness? So they're not simple questions, and up until recently, focusing on eco-friendly packaging didn't even move the needle. I had done research back at Clorox where, people want to make sure the cleaning product cleans and that it's easy to spray and easy to use, and they're not going to trade off even 10 cents or 2 cents for eco-friendly if it doesn't deliver on those. The world is changing now, so we have to think about what are those trade-offs and how do we communicate.
Yeah, it seems to be a very fine balance between marketing and PR, because on one side you're trying to sell the product through the lens of eco-friendliness, and on the other end you want to make sure it's not greenwashing, because there's a lot of products out there, especially in the packaging space, that talk about being green where they're not really green. They're greener than some things, but they're not as green as they could be. And the other point you mentioned that's interesting is the functionality of it. I'd like to think in terms of function before form. So like, no matter how green the packaging is, if it doesn't work, it's a wrong move, right?
Yeah.
If you have that spray that basically has to spray, or if you have packaging that's primary packaging for cosmetics, and the cosmetics are seeping through the paper to the side, like into the outside of the tube, for example, I don't think that the tube is compostable or biodegradable really matters if the product can't really sit in it on the shelf for 6 months.
It's not a happy feeling.
Yeah.
Anatoly, before we wrap, there's one other thing that I think your audience would value thinking about, right? So we talked about the strategy. How are you going to define your brand, be best in the world at something? That's pretty high level. Then we talked about executing, to differentiate and make an impression at the shelf and have a brand architecture clear. In the middle, there's this idea of thinking about the journey that the customer goes through. All of the touch points from when they first become aware of your brand through whatever means. It could be online, it could be in a store, it could be in an ad, moving to, the pre-purchase decision, to the purchase decision, to the unboxing, to all of the touch points, literally mapping that out on paper and thinking about how do we integrate this look and this experience across all of these touch points? What is it about our brand personality and what we stand for that needs to be conveyed so that you're approaching those decisions as a holistic exercise, not just a package, but a package that fits into an ecosystem of touch points that deliver your brand.
No, completely agree. I mean, packaging is right now, I think, more important than ever before. First of all, just with the number of products that are on the shelf. Second of all, with the different ways of how you can interact with them, and making sure that it's consistent from seeing it online, seeing it at the store, receiving the product, and so forth. I think it's paramount importance right now. And I'm very happy that the two of you joined us here at BizCast to talk about the role of packaging. Both of your opinions you come from different sides of the industry. David, you specifically with packaging and how packaging defines a brand, and Roland on general kind of product evolution cycles. And I think that this conversation was extremely dynamic as a result of it, on bringing in specific packaging, but looking at the bigger picture, not just as in isolation as packaging, and then being able to differentiate it, that it's no longer competing on price, but it's competing on general experience. And how does that packaging play into your advertising? How does it play into your marketing? How does it play into everything else? To where it's no longer just about the cost of a cardboard box, one compared to another, but how is it as part of your business, and how are you serving your customers better as a result of it? So thank you both very much for joining, and I think this will be tremendously helpful to a lot of people that are looking to sell some product.
Great, thanks, Anatoly. And now everyone go turn your products into Tiffany's.
Yeah.
That's it.
or do volume and sell in Walmart. That's okay too.
Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you, David.
Thank you.